Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something incredibly complex. We're looking at a deeply dense, frankly erratic audio transcript that paints this really intense picture of extreme behavioral experimentation. It's this fascinating, abstract narrative blending psychology, heavy surveillance, and a completely distorted reality. We're going to unpack the internal logic of this source material to map out exactly what's being described. So whether you look at this as a psychological study in sheer paranoia, or honestly a sci-fi thriller come to life, strap in. We're going on a wild ride into a meticulously detailed worldview.
Right off the bat, this narrative hooks us with a pretty staggering premise. What if your suffering was literally just an experiment? Imagine a scenario where every hardship you face, every obstacle, every single bit of emotional pain isn't random at all. It's meticulously calculated. Picture living in a world where you're just the unwitting subject of an incredibly elaborate, punishing behavioral study. That is the exact psychological thriller aspect we're decoding today. So, to make sense of all this, here's our roadmap. We'll be covering the behaviorist's experiment, mechanics of the torture, the cycle of investigation, implementing control scripts, authority and manipulation, and finally, the ultimate objective. Let's jump right into part one, the behaviorist's experiment. The narrative immediately sets up this chilling, totally uneven power dynamic. On one side, you have the observer. This is a coalition of authorities, police, and expert forensic behaviorists armed to the teeth with advanced gadgets. And on the other side, the observed. This is an intelligent subject desperately trying to evolve, find solutions, and basically just seek the truth through the immense suffering being inflicted on them. Now, this mastermind behaviorist doesn't work alone. As the subject notes in the transcript, he hires authority, and they're trying to figure out how he responds, how he reacts. The behaviorist deploys what are called manual authority figures. Their entire job in this twisted game is simply to show their faces at strategic times, monitor the subject's reactions, and report back. The subject is just constantly being watched and measured.
Moving on to section 2, mechanics of the torture.
So, how do they actually control this reality? Well, the authorities rely on a terrifying array of tools designed to force a programmed pattern of behavioral change. We're talking about highly advanced gadgets capable of transmitting images directly into the subject's mind, projecting voices, and playing back specific programmed languages to completely disorient them. But it goes way beyond just audio and visual tricks. Physical harm is literally administered through poisonous gas and drops. And here is where things take a genuinely surreal turn. These poisonous drops are specifically meant to cause bodily harm and, shockingly, reduce age. I mean, think about that. The twisted psychological violation here is that they actually want to regress the victim back to an infantile state. They're trying to entirely bypass adult defenses so they can rewrite and reprogram negative behaviors from a totally blank slate. All of these tools combined engineer what is dubbed a hyper-simulated reality. And the goal? It's to push the subject right to a critical breaking point of suffering. The behaviorists basically want to see what happens when the pain becomes absolutely unbearable, forcing the subject to take action, either to reduce their own pain or to frantically investigate the very case being built against them. Which brings us to section 3, the cycle of investigation. But what happens when 10 years of this extreme pressure yields no tangible results? Well, you enter an endless loop of fake investigations and gaslighting. It all starts with victimization, followed by a formal complaint. Then, the police seemingly investigate and verify the facts. Months later, men in authority literally trespass into the home to gather truthful evidence. But here's the kicker. It never ends. It's an infinite loop designed to just constantly reset the subject's hope and despair. Because as the subject realizes,
and the cases are never closed. I mean, there's a cycle of cases.
this endless legal and investigative limbo is completely weaponized. By creating constant obstacles and keeping the subject tied up, the experimenters are aiming to frustrate them and essentially project the absolute most negative version of a human being onto them. It is a continuous, unbroken chain of mental pressure. All right, section 4, implementing control scripts. To maintain this constant pressure, they have to use active, micro-level mind control, and it's described in the source as frantic, repetitive, and coldly clinical. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. It takes this chaotic experience of feeling completely controlled and translates it into a rigid, step-by-step process. Every single action the subject takes feels like it was pre-written by the observers in some vast behavioral script.
So what happens if the subject actually starts figuring it out? Enter the control script. Whenever the subject has a truthful thought that might help them minimize their suffering, this control script kicks in. It's an instantaneous, sinister emotional response, which is usually just overwhelming fear. It's programmed into the subject specifically to block their thoughts and force them to see the game as incredibly dangerous, keeping them firmly trapped.
And the control doesn't even stop when the subject sleeps. Enter dream sequence programming. The authorities allegedly inject negative dream sequences and then actively reinforce them upon waking. And the stated purpose for this? To permanently store these negative vibrations so that the subject is literally forced to take birth in those dark dimensions of consciousness in the future. It's a deeply metaphysical layer thrown right on top of this psychological warfare.
Up next, Section 5, Authority and Manipulation. This all naturally leads us to question the motives of the people running the simulation, and it exposes a brilliant disconnect between what authorities do and why they do it. If they block social media, the perceived motive is total communication control. If they show their faces at night, it's a calculated move to elicit anger and record the response. And all those fake, endless investigations, the true motive is for the authorities to evade their own sins, hide their corruption, and basically just keep their money in the bank. The overarching belief here is that the entire system is a massive cover-up. As this quote notes, so a higher intelligent consciousness always tries to protect his own agents, and he also tries to protect his own image. The behaviorists and police aren't actually looking for justice at all. They're just playing a blame game to protect themselves from being exposed for their own unrighteous deeds and corrupted experiments. Finally, Section 6, the ultimate objective. So why put someone through a decade of this? Well, we arrive at this bizarre, twisted paradox. The whole point of applying third-degree torture and continuous psychological pressure is to force that person to evolve into an intelligent saint. Seriously, the behaviorists want to see just how much the subject can evolve and find solutions to the universe while being totally buried under the most negative projections possible. And supposedly, after 10 rigorous years of suffering and navigating this terrifying maze of authority, the answer that the entire cosmos was posing is finally found. The subject describes it as just a simple sentence written on a page in a book, a realization that is worth more than anything else in the universe. It implies that the extreme suffering did, in fact, lead to a profound, almost enlightened breakthrough. Which leaves us with one final, profound question to ponder. As perceptions are constantly manipulated and the lines blur entirely, all the effort the authorities put into observing human behavior kind of just collapses on itself. When a system repeatedly manipulates perception, does the criminal become the experimenter, or does the experimenter become the criminal? It's a really striking thought to end on, highlighting the absolute collapse of reality and authority within this narrative. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer, and keep questioning what you see.